Ford family has owned the firm ever since it was established more than 110 years ago. Ford is the second biggest family-run corporation in the world. They were also responsible for producing the one and only automobile that Jim Morrison ever owned, 1967 Shelby GT 500. But how was it that Ford was able to make it through not one but two world wars and the Great Depression? Let's take a look at the long and illustrious history of one of the most famous automobile manufacturers in the world, Henry Ford. Sparking Ford Revolution. Henry's first foray into the automobile manufacturing industry was the establishment of the Detroit Automobile Company in the year 1899. However, the firm failed, and in 1901, it was reorganized into what is now known as the Henry Ford firm. Henry Ford, however, had a falling out with his financial supporters in the year 1902, and as a result, he departed the firm with little more than the rights to his name and $900, which, considering the year 1902, was certainly quite a substantial amount of money. In any case, Henry Ford sought the assistance of his close friend Alexander Y. Malcolmson in order to fund the establishment of another vehicle firm. The business partnership known as Ford and Malcolmson was established, and the two individuals started designing a vehicle and ordering its components. On the other hand, money was running out quickly, and the manufacturing company was demanding payment. Malcolmson had little choice but to consult his uncle, John Gray, who was the chief executive officer of the German-American Savings Bank. He proposed merging Ford and Malcolmson as well as recruiting additional investors into the company. As a result, the Ford Motor Company was formed in the year 1903 with a total of 12 investors possessing a total of 1,000 shares. Despite the concerns of some of the company's stockholders, the automobile manufacturer saw profits almost immediately. However, Malcolmson was eventually forced out of the firm when Gray sided with Ford in a dispute between him and Ford about the direction the company should go in the future. After Gray's untimely death in 1906, he sold his shares to Ford, and subsequently, Ford went on to assume the post of president of the firm he helped establish. Therefore, Ford Motor Company had a very eventful beginning in its history. First automobile. The Ford Model K was the first model produced by the firm to have 6 cylinders. It was also known as the Gentleman's Roadster, and it sold for a price that was much more than that of other automobiles that were on the market at the time. When compared to the selling price of the Enger 40 at $2,000, the selling price of the Oldsmobile Runabout at $650, and the selling price of the Success at barely $250, the Model K brought in $2,800. In the year 1908, the Model T was first made available. In the vicinity of this period, a leased plant in the city of Detroit was producing a meager number of automobiles on a daily basis. During its initial year on the market, the Model T had a production rate of little more than 10,000 units. When there was such a huge demand for the Model T automobiles, the business transferred manufacturing to a building that was much bigger in 1910. And, by 1913, Ford had perfected the fundamental procedures of an assembly line and had reduced the amount of time it took to produce an automobile from 12.5 hours to only 2 hours and 40 minutes, and then further reduced the amount of time it took to produce an automobile to just 1 hour and 33 minutes. Sales climbed to $501,000 in 1915 as a direct result of an advertisement that was effective in its goal to enhance sales by offering profit sharing if sales reached $300,000 between August 1914 and August 1915. By the year 1920, annual output would have surpassed 1 million. Ford manufacturing in other countries. Ford did not remain a local firm for very long, and in 1904, they established Ford of Canada, which was the first step toward achieving worldwide status for the corporation. In spite of this, the corporation didn't begin its serious push into international markets until 1911. In 1917, they launched manufacturing operations in Ireland, England, and France. Almost immediately after, Denmark, Germany, Austria, and Argentina followed. By 1925, factories had already been established in the countries of Japan, South Africa, and Australia. Thus, by the year 1920, Ford was manufacturing half of all automobiles sold in the United States and 40% of all automobiles sold in Britain. The First World War. What happened to Ford? The First World War had an effect on a lot of different auto manufacturers, and Ford was no exception. It is interesting to note that in 1915, Henry Ford traveled to Europe on a peace mission with other pacifists in an effort to put an end to World War I. As a consequence of this, Henry Ford himself gained a considerable amount of notoriety. In any case, despite the fact that Henry Ford was a pacifist, he did ultimately provide his support to the war effort, and his Model T formed the foundation for several Allied military vehicles, including the 1916 ambulance and the Ford 3-ton M1918 tank, the case of Dodge v. Ford Motor Company. By 1916, Ford had a capital surplus of $60 million, but Henry Ford announced that he was going to stop paying special dividends to shareholders in favor of investing in new facilities. Because of this, Ford was able to boost output while simultaneously reducing employee headcount. However, this was challenged in court by Ford in 1917 by the Dodge brothers, who at the time were the company's biggest non-family stockholders. The court found in their favor, and as a result, Ford was required to pay a special dividend of $19 million. In 1919, an appeal of the case was heard before the Supreme Court of Michigan, and it was affirmed there as well. As a direct result of the Dodge versus Ford Motor Company lawsuit, Henry Ford made up his mind to buy out the company's remaining stockholders. To do this, he made an offer to buy out minority owners and threatened to quit the firm in order to start a competing business. This strategy was successful, and in 1919, he acquired full ownership of the corporation for a total investment of $125 million, the depths of the Great Depression. Obviously, it wasn't long before the financial crisis known as the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression got underway. Ford, just like almost every other company operating at the time, was forced to reduce output and reduce the number of employees it employed. Although Henry Ford assisted a limited number of families financially by providing them with loans and sections of land on which to work, he infuriated many people when he suggested that those who were without jobs should make more efforts to find work on their own. On March 7, 1932, a group of jobless employees numbering between 3,000 and 5,000 marched to the Ford factory in River Rouge to submit a petition asking for further help. Regrettably, the demonstration descended into chaos, and police responded by firing tear gas and being doused with freezing water from fire engines. As the situation became progressively more volatile, police officers and plant security guards ended up opening fire on demonstrators who were not armed. As a direct consequence of this, 4 individuals passed away instantly, a 5th passed away while being treated at the hospital, and anywhere between 50 and 60 more men had significant injuries. The Soviet Union and the Ford Motor Company. 1929 was the year that Ford signed a contract with the Soviet Union, under which the Soviet Union agreed to acquire vehicles and auto components to the value of $13 million from Ford. As a condition of the deal, Ford pledged to provide technical support until 1938. In 1932, the facility was renamed the Gorky Automotive Facility, which prompted a large number of Americans to relocate to the Soviet Union so that they could work on the plant and its manufacturing lines. After the facility was finished being constructed, the vast majority of the employees fled. Nevertheless, some of those who remained were victims of Stalin's Great Terror. They were either executed by firing squad or sent to gulags in the Soviet Union. What did Ford do during the Second World War? Ford kept in close touch with Germany before the war, so much so that the government there gave him a medal called the Grand Cross of the German Eagle. His anti-Semitism got a lot of press, and many people thought he was on the side of the Nazis. When the Nazi government took over many companies held by foreign countries, Ford kept 52% of his stock without any control or financial gain. The German armed forces were built with a lot of help from the Ford plants in Germany. Ford worked out a deal that allowed Germany to get materials, especially tires. Around this time, Ford was hesitant to join the war effort, and when France fell, he personally stopped plans to make plane engines for the Allies. However, it was Pearl Harbor that made the company help the war effort in a big way. In the end, the company made 390,000 tanks and trucks, 27,000 engines, 270,000 jeeps, and hundreds of thousands of parts and machine tools. After the war, Ford kept the Nazi-era bosses on staff. In addition, Henry Ford died on April 7, 1947, and about 7 million people were saddened by his death. Thus, Henry II became chairman of the board and CEO. The name Ford is now ingrained in the history of the automobile industry all over the globe, despite the fact that Henry Ford started out in a modest workshop in the state of Michigan. Henry Ford's ability to persevere in the face of adversity during the company's formative years resulted in the development of the Ford Motor Company, an organization that has continued to be successful and important for more than a century. Ford Motor Company, which has a market valuation of around $60 billion as of July 2023, is a shining example of the American industrial and entrepreneurial spirit and stands as a dazzling tribute to the long family tradition that it represents. And that's a wrap, folks. I hope you enjoyed Ford's incredible journey from garage to greatness. If you are excited about history on wheels, don't forget to give that subscribe pedal a good push. Stay in the fast lane and buckle up for more amazing stories. We'll catch you on the next video.